Perfect. Yes, and welcome. Appreciate everybody joining for the transition from Taleo to Oracle Recruiting, SI Group's journey. So just to get started, a little bit of housekeeping here to restate the session topic, right? In the session, Alyssa and I going to share some important tips and tricks for migrating from Taleo to Oracle Recruiting. And so, as Lowry just mentioned, the backstory, the why for that move, and how Castlebridge made that process easier for them, right? And more than anything, I wanted to shine a big old spotlight on Taleo Enterprise Edition. I get that question a lot, sometimes like right now in the chat or at the end. That wait, are we talking about enterprise or business? It just SI Group was coming from Taleo Enterprise Edition, so that was really the context of that. And then again, going to Oracle Recruiting Cloud. So as far as an agenda goes, we'll do some introductions here and then talk through the project overview, right? For SI Group, I don't think it was ever if, but just when they were making that shift to Oracle Recruiting. So just talk through that. And then from there, some benefits gained that they've realized since going live. And then pivot to talking through the timeline, not just for SI Group and the project that we're talking through today, but just generally speaking and some considerations and what can impact that. Some tips and tricks, and then as Lowry mentioned, definitely leaving time at the end for some Q&A. And then certainly in the meeting chat here, take advantage of that as well. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive into introductions. So Alyssa, do you want to go?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Alyssa O'Sullivan here. I'm the Director of Talent Management at SI Group. So my role originally when I joined SI Group was solely focused on recruitment and standardizing and rolling out a global process when it comes to our recruiting practices. Since then, it's kind of started to incorporate more of the HRIS technology side. And so I think this kind of marries very well together. And one of the big pieces that the company had on a project list was implementing a new applicant tracking system. And so this was an area where we felt we had some efficiencies that we could gain and wanted to make this change. A lot of the I'll say a lot of the analysis in deciding what solution to go to was done prior to me joining. But I do have a little bit of insight into that and kind of why Oracle Recruiting Cloud was selected. So I can go into that a little bit more as we get further into the deck.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. And yeah, Matt Runkle, I head up the talent acquisition practice at Castlebridge. So that includes Oracle recruiting and journeys, aka onboarding, and that can be so much more, right? So I've always loved the talent acquisition space. In my past life, I was always a Taleo guy. Until Open World 2017. I remember the moment, I remember the session sitting in that auditorium and Oracle announcing the unveiling of Oracle Recruiting Cloud. So fast forward that spring, I came on as an early adopter, kicked off the project, and had one of the first go lives in the world for Oracle Recruiting. And I often say I haven't looked back since, but I love a special place in my heart for bringing folks over from Taleo to Oracle Recruiting. So I live in the Louisville, Kentucky area and call that home. And yeah, so appreciate everybody joining here today. I'll just a little bit about Castlebridge Consulting. Our sole focus is Oracle Cloud. Multi-pillar expertise. So sure, today's session specifically for Oracle HCM, more specifically in the talent acquisition space, but Castlebridge as a whole, multi-pillar, but our sole focus being Oracle Cloud. On average, our consultants have over 10 years of cloud experience and just pioneers in the Oracle Cloud space. We're headquartered in Tampa, Florida. We do have a development center in India and founded on agile principles and value oriented, right? So not just order takers, we're not looking for just expensive old process, but challenging, the way things are being done, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So that's just a little bit about Castlebridge. Alyssa, I'll pass it back over to you for SI Group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't read through all of this, but SI Group is a specialty chemical manufacturer. So we manufacture products that go into other products to make them perform better. We have our products end up in a variety of different industries and markets, whether that's oil and gas, rubber adhesives, plastics, pharmaceuticals. So our products are what make it so that the colors don't fade as quickly, or tires don't wear as fast, all of those things. We are headquartered in the Woodlands, in the Houston area in Texas. We've got about 2,000 employees globally, and we operate with about 20 manufacturing sites. And I'm based here in our Schenectady location in New York.
All right. So yeah, just diving right into the project overview and really just the goals. So, as SI Group was kicking off this journey, like Alyssa mentioned, of shopping around for it in the applicant tracking system, there were a few key goals here. And so, Alyssa, do you want to talk through those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were looking for something that could enhance the um, user experience, both internally and externally with our candidates. We did want to have, one unified platform, which we felt would be, provide us with more efficiencies. So we currently use Oracle as our HCM system. And so we wanted to be able to leverage this module within it because of the connectivity and the ease of kind of the data flow from module to module. And so, that really was kind of the crux of what we were looking for. So I do want to preface and just say that, I recognize that we did not utilize Taleo to its fullest. I think where the company was in their maturity with talent acquisition, we weren't in a place where we had the capacity to really dig into the Taleo tool as much as we could have. So there were pieces of it like reporting. There were customizations that could have been done to make things more efficient or user friendly that had just never been done. Um, but I do think that, when the company, when we did an analysis of it, it's kind of like, where do we want to spend our time? And our dollars, and was it to update something that's kind of aging, or do we want to shift over and take this opportunity to gain some other efficiencies by utilizing a different module of Oracle? And so that was a lot of the driver for us. I also want to just preface that we only have a applicant tracking system in North America currently. Our goal is to implement this outside of the US. However, we have not quite gotten there yet. So we are still mid-journey in our Oracle Recruiting Cloud journey. We will be doing that in the future, but so I don't have, unfortunately, much experience here outside of the US with this platform.
Right. And then, I know we've been live, so we went live, in the spring, late spring.
Yeah, like April 1st, I think.
Yeah. And so, as we talk through maybe some benefits gained that you've realized.
Yeah, so one of the things that I mentioned a little bit there was the connectivity with other modules. So one of the things that we found, we were having some issues with Taleo to Oracle, was that sometimes the data didn't flow over nicely, and we'd end up with things erroring out or getting a glitch, or it was just there was some manual work that had to be done to ensure that we got everything mapped over correctly. So now utilizing Oracle Recruiting Cloud, everything just flows very nicely, from one module to another. So there's less manual work behind the scenes for us. There's less stuff that our HRIS team is having to double check or dig into when we have new hires to make sure that all of that gets set up. So it did really provide us with, a lot of benefit there. Certainly from a candidate experience perspective, again, some of it may have been how we had Taleo configured. It, but it was a little clunky in how we felt it was for candidate experience. Our candidates had to create an account before they actually applied. So this utilizing ORC allowed us to update and modernize our career site. We added in the feature for resume and profile parsing, which makes it much faster for candidates to be able to apply. Pulling in that information, they're not having to manually add everything or copy it over, and they can apply now without creating an account. So, we drastically reduced that time of application, which nowadays, is critically important. And when people are applying, right, they're not going to want to scroll through pages and pages of an application. If it takes longer than, a minute or two, we probably will lose them. So the faster we can make that process, the better. Another thing that was big for the company was onboarding. One, standardization in how we're onboarding our employees, but also just the experience. So we tied in onboarding, we by utilizing journeys and have created a new hire journey, which we were able to develop an auto trigger feature for it. There are pieces that kick off to managers, to the new hire. There's stuff that we have that kicks off and actions for a manager to take prior to a new hire starting so that they can prepare properly for that individual. Since going live, we've also created a second one, which is, well, actually we created two more. One that is a more concise version that is for our interns, and another one that is for a new hire that is a manager. So, maybe additional resources that they may need to know or access as they are coming in as a people leader. And, so giving them some additional tasks so they can familiarize themselves with our systems and how to manage employees here at SI Group. And then the last piece that we found that was really beneficial was scheduling efficiency. So oftentimes in recruiting, right, we're sending out meeting invites for interviews for, with the candidates. But then if that person goes on vacation, if it's gone through Outlook, we don't have a lot of visibility to it if somebody's covering for them. And so integrating with O365 allowed us that visibility in ORC so that other people who are then covering for somebody when they're out can see what that schedule looks like, who that individual is scheduled with, what those times are, and can make some changes if needed to that schedule. So because it's all driven straight out of ORC. So that really allowed us some more efficiencies there and with our coverage and scheduling.
So yeah, let's take a look at the timeline. And I know we have a lot going on in this slide here. So just to illustrate or show, for SI Group in this project, we're right at about 5 months, right? We kicked off about a year ago, like Alyssa said, went live in April. And so, right around that 5 month mark for SI Group. Average duration, right? I get that question a lot, especially as you're considering this trek of going from Taleo to ORC. average duration, 4 to 7 months. And you look at that and like, it's a pretty big swing. Like what could impact that? Well, there's a few potential impacts or certainly considerations around that. So number one, data conversion. Do not underestimate that. On the surface, a lot of people will just be like, it's just recruiting conversion. Well, oftentimes that can be more involved than an HR conversion. Why? We're talking about all sorts of different facets, right? We're talking about candidates, we're talking about requisitions, offers, the respective attachments. Oh, by the way, pre-screening questions. There's many things to consider and many facets of that. So don't estimate that data conversion. As we talk about that conversion, on the surface, a lot of people, say, well, yeah, I would need to bring it all in for 7 years or more, right? And really, you want and need to take a step back and talk through and really think through data to convert versus data to archive. And what I mean by that is, what do we really need in the new system, in Oracle Recruiting? If within the UI that you're able to see this or search for it or whatever, versus data to archive, right? So if 6 months or a year from now, you need to pull up something for a compliance or audit reason, so that data to convert, actually being able to use it in the UI versus data to archive. Regardless, you got to do something with it and you need to tap into it. But where you land on that decision can make a big impact on the duration of the project itself. Another consideration would be footprint, right? So Alyssa, as she mentioned, our focus in this phase one was North America, and then in future phases, we'll be tackling rest of world. North America, they were the ones on Taleo that needed to get from Taleo to another system, right? And that system being Oracle Recruiting. Rest of world, they're not on an applicant tracking system right now. And so, no matter what your footprint is, that could definitely have an impact or consideration to that timeline and how you approach that. So, if globally you're on Taleo today, well, obviously we need to get them all over, right? If maybe one of those regions isn't, again, we're just talking through those different approaches. In short, big bang or phased. Resource availability, that's a big one, right? Because every organization's a little bit different and nobody knows that organization internally better than yourself, right? Here tuning in. And I say that because, let's say that marketing needs to weigh in on some stuff, right? That they're helping with, the branding of the career site, the wrapper of any email correspondences that go out, the warm and fuzzy stuff from the onboarding process. Well, is that person somebody that internally you need to get proper allocation for within the project? Or is that somebody that you can ping on Teams and they'd be willing and able to meet this afternoon, right? If it's that first one that they need full allocation or partial allocation and this, that, and the other, of course, you want to get those ducks in a row and make sure that they're available during the window of this project. Also, change management, right? There's a lot of relatable, transferable concepts from Taleo to Oracle Recruiting, right? So I would not anticipate a huge change management training need from the general recruiter base, those that are currently actively using Taleo today. But what if only recruiters are using Taleo today, and there's always been this dream of the managers doing it? And now's the time. As part of this rollout, we're empowering the managers finally to initiate requisitions and play an active role in the funneling of candidates and stuff, right? Well, maybe if they haven't ever touched an ATS before, an applicant tracking system before, well, sure, there is going to be a little bit of change management, but little or small, again, a potential impact or consideration for your overall timeline. Okay. Tips and tricks. So as far as tips and tricks go, a couple things, starting up with pre-project planning, right? So vetting of third-party integrations. So for most things, you'll see a like for like, right? So background check. If you're using HireRight today, are you going to be using them tomorrow? If you're using them today in Taleo, HireRight, Sterling, Big, whoever it might be, right? It's pretty much a like for like. And if you're keeping with that same vendor, there may not be a big thing there. Still check that contract, because if it explicitly says Taleo, then sure, maybe you just need to have, an amendment to that contract. But if you're disenchanted with your current vendor and you're shopping for new folks, well, you're going to need time to vet those third-party integrations, have the respective demos, ultimately get the contract in place. Because all of those things that I just described, if you've already kicked off the project, right, you blink at you're at user acceptance testing, and you're still working through the contract and red lines of your background check vendor or your assessments or tax screening. So that's what I mean by the vetting of third-party integrations. So approval of various connections. As Alyssa and I were talking through this one, it was a really good point that she brought up, because, you know, within Oracle Recruiting, there's a lot of great functionality that tie in with Office 365 that she mentioned. And there's a delivered integration with LinkedIn Recruiter for Recruiter System Connect, right? There's a lot of really great connections that we can just enable. But with the transfer of data, you may need the blessing of like IT security and or legal. So if that's the case, and that needs to go through the proper channels, I've never seen that be a showstopper, but I have seen it throttle that feature until it's gone through the proper channels for approval. Looping in internal partners. I touched on that in the last slide there for the timeline. But really, again, what I mean by that is just making the teams aware. So again, that Office 365 integration, for example. Well, we need your AD administrator looped in, because within AD, they're going to do a few things, and then they provide us a few things that we can then plug into Oracle Recruiting, right? So there's just a collaboration, and we're not talking about that being a massive effort, but they need to be tuned in and available to do that. Same deal with marketing, right? And I say marketing slash corp com. Maybe recruiting internally, you all have your repository, and obviously you have your branding stuff, and you're more than capable of doing it. Career site, for example, good news for you, Taleo folks. You don't have to worry about the branding file anymore and coding a HTML index file and CSS. And I get into the weeds, but it's WYSIWYG. Like, sure, you can do some coding if you want, but you'd be happy to know that it's very user friendly. You don't need a web developer to build out a career site within Oracle. Right. So another tip and trick, standardize as much as possible up front. So, as it relates to SI group, right? Sure, this phase one, yeah, the focus was North America, but we had a global design in mind, so that as we look at the other regions, as we look at EMEA and APAC, right, that we have the global design, the baseline in place, and then we can accommodate for the uniquenesses as necessary. But best practice would be to standardize as much as possible up front. And I say that both for business process and then also for the other things, right? The usual suspects, offer letters, onboarding tasks, and everything. And maybe your offer letters are already in a happy place and you've standardized those pretty well. Maybe your onboarding process is in a happy place, and that's if it is, great, good for you. If there's opportunity for change, again, doing that before can save a lot of time later. Another usual suspect or kind of gotcha, approvals, right? So you think about, okay, the design of it, and then if getting the approval on the approval decision has to go through all sorts of different layers, gosh, if you could go ahead and get that built out and stamped up front, that can save you again from being backed into a corner at user acceptance testing, and you're still trying to sort that stuff out, right? That's all things that you want and need to avoid. So knowledge transfer sessions early and often. And what I mean by that is, sprinkling those throughout the project rather than having this massive knowledge transfer dump at the end of the project where one, nobody's got time for that, right? You're stabilizing, you're training, you're doing a million other things. You don't have time for days long knowledge transfer sessions. And further, who's going to retain that stuff anyway? So having those knowledge transfer sessions early and often have been really helpful. And I think what's been nice is again that background of say myself, for example, my counterparts having that background in the Taleo space helps translate that stuff for the team. And I know I keep rambling on, but listen, feel free to interject or stop me along the way
Sure.
here.
I
Yeah,
was just going to comment a little bit on the internal partners piece because I think that is important. There, I feel like there's a lot of other individuals that needed to be looped in throughout the process that we maybe didn't think about at the beginning. And thankfully, none of them were it wasn't super time consuming necessarily for them, but we wanted to reevaluate what our pre-employment questions were. And so needed to get with our labor and employment attorney. And then we looked at how do we had certain documents that we had in Taleo for e-signature. And how do we bring that over into a process here into ORC? And are there changes now that we are making this transition that we want to take advantage of this time to make? So then, working with our compliance director or like Matt had mentioned, various people within IT. We also we made a change with a third party integration. So we took this opportunity to make a change in our background check vendor. That process took longer than I would have liked internally here between procurement and legal for us to vet all of that. So, in full transparency, we were not ready to go live on day one with that new vendor. So we've had to sort of phase that. And so we have made a transition now at this point, but they are still not integrated in. So that is another kind of update that we will need to make here at some point to get them integrated into ORC so that we can trigger those requests from the system as opposed to having to go into the third party platform to make those requests. So had I known it was going to take that long, I would have started that process much sooner for us to vet the new vendor so that we could hopefully have built that into our go live plan.
Yeah, and I think we keep talking about the third party integrations, and I think that's exactly right. You know, if you have time for doing that ahead of the project, or definitely make it a priority early in the project. Just that coordination, that procurement, that evaluating different vendors and potentially making changes. Um, I think Matt and Alyssa, across the board, what we see with clients is if they're making those vendor changes, it always takes longer than anticipated. So any of that you can do up front will certainly improve the overall project and the project success.
Yeah, definitely. And last point on here, and then I think move into Q&A. So I'll stop rambling here in just a second. But lastly, for tips and tricks, just that balance of wants versus needs, the nice to haves versus actual needs, and just not over customizing for many reasons. And just like I said at the beginning of just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just challenging, is the teams are asking for this, that, and the other. Taking a step back and looking at those asks holistically, just to understand, really the root of it and what are they trying to achieve. I mean, even if you look at your business processes, maybe today in Taleo, sure, you could recreate your CSW right now in Oracle Recruiting. But again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. How and why did we arrive at that? There's got to be some opportunities for enhancements or improvements there. But yeah.
And
See,
I just want to add to that too. I think, that was a lot of the support, or not a lot, but it was a definitely a value added piece of support here that Castlebridge provided, was being able to share those best practices of, kind of reeling us back in sometimes when we would say, well, could we do it this way? And could we have this? And, it'd be a conversation of, well, we can. However, if we do that, it may cause more manual work down the road, or it may not, be as simple when you go to roll out globally. So just helping us to think about kind of the pros and cons of the decisions that we were making and how we were configuring the platform, allowed us to then go, okay, well, what do we need? What's a nice to have? What can we live without? What makes sense? Are there different ways that we can approach this to get the ultimate result that we're looking for? And so that really helped us to be able to create something that would be, I think, user friendly and give us what we needed, but wasn't overly complex.
Yeah, definitely. Melissa, before we open it up to Q&A, anything else from your side?
The only other thing I wanted to add that I forgot to add in the beginning was that our population, our talent population, is both salaried and hourly. So we tried to customize this or develop this platform here, so that it would kind of touch on all of those talent pools and the variety of ways that they may be coming to us and exploring careers, differences in the onboarding processes that they have, different offer letter templates. We have both union and non-union populations. So being able to create solutions for all of those various situations that we have.
Yeah, that's a good call out. And I know one thing that as it relates to the data conversion to touch on also is we talked through, or I touched on in the introduction, right? The Recruit Bridge tool of Castlebridge, just to help folks migrate from Taleo to Oracle Recruiting and ease that pain and really just speed the process, right? For that data conversion piece, regardless of if you're bringing stuff over or archiving it.
And on that too, our decision was to archive and not carry the data over. So we had a sunset approach with Taleo. And then we took the time to reopen the requisitions in ORC. But we did not carry over any of the candidate data. We kind of just started fresh, or would have folks either finish out the process in Taleo or ask those few candidates that we might have to reapply in ORC. And then, with the archive art, we kind of looked at it and thought back and said, okay, how often are we being asked for historical data? We did some analysis to see, okay, what would that look like if we were to archive it? How easy would it be for us to access it, and would it be readable? And then we also ran all of that through our legal team as well, just to make sure that they were comfortable with it, as that's usually who's coming to us asking for historical data. So just making sure that it would provide them with whatever they needed, during any kind of investigation or something like that. But So we ultimately just chose to archive the data and not convert anything.
So while we're waiting for questions, another thing that I wanted to point out was one thing a lot of clients don't think of up front is the single sign-on, and this goes back to working with other parts of the organization, like your IT. And even if you have single sign-on already implemented, we're going to need to look at, well, how do candidates that are transitioning from candidate to employee, how do they get in ahead of day one and access the system? Or maybe if you have IP whitelisting or LBAC, like a firewall enabled, how's your career site going to punch out so that everybody can access it and apply? So that bringing in folks from other parts of the organization, depending on your specific scenario, is definitely something that you'll want to think about. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We can certainly, a lot of clients reach out to us and say, hey, we're thinking about making this move in 3 months or 6 months. What can we do now to be prepared and ready to go and make it more efficient 3 to 6 months from now? And we're happy to kind of give you a punch list and discuss any.
Great. I see your comment there, Renee. And yes, that was a nice one for us because we found that it was a little bit tricky when people would go out on vacations or something. And even if somebody's covering and kind of knows when those invites are, they don't have ownership of the invite. So they couldn't make a change to it. And it got a little clunky if we needed to change something. So, having that ability to trigger those invites directly from ORC was a really nice feature and gives us a little bit more visibility, to what's happening across the team. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for your time attending today. We really appreciate you going through this journey with us. And Alyssa, thank you so much. And Matt, thank you all for your time. I know it took time to compile this and get it ready and really present it to everybody here.